There is a stirring in your spirit that you can't quite put into words. A tension you feel every time you think about walking away from someone who has been both a blessing and a burden. You've replayed the conversations, weighed the history, analyzed the disappointments, and you've almost convinced yourself that letting go is the easiest solution. But before you decide, something in your soul hesitates. Something in your heart whispers, not yet. And that whisper is not weakness, it's wisdom trying to get your attention. There are moments in life when God puts a divine pause on your spirit because the story isn't finished yet. You may be tired, frustrated, or emotionally drained, but just because the season has been heavy doesn't mean it's over. Sometimes the enemy pushes you to run, while God calls you to stay still long enough to see what he's building beneath the surface. And I know how confusing it is when your emotions say leave, but your spirit says wait. Waiting can feel like losing. Waiting can feel like wasting time. But waiting, when God is in it, becomes the womb of transformation. You've been telling yourself that this person doesn't deserve another chance. You've been reminding yourself of everything they did wrong, how they mishandled you, misunderstood you, or didn't show up the way you needed. But there's another truth you're wrestling with, a truth that says even imperfect people can be used for divine purpose. And sometimes God assigns people to you not because they are perfect, but because your connection is part of both of your healing journeys. You think you're the only one needing grace, but God is teaching them through you and teaching you through them. There's something God is trying to show you in this relationship, something that can only be revealed through endurance, through patience, through spiritual maturity. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in tension. It happens when two imperfect people choose understanding over assumptions, humility over pride, healing over hiding. This person may be the mirror God is using to show you parts of yourself you've avoided for years. Maybe they expose your anger, your fear, your tendency to shut down. Maybe they challenge your patience or test your faith. But what if this test is a setup for breakthrough on the other side? Sometimes leaving is easier than facing the conversation that could heal everything. Sometimes shutting down is easier than being vulnerable again. But healing requires honesty, and honesty requires courage, and you have that courage, even if you've been too tired to feel it. You've grown, you've matured, you've survived battles that should have taken you out. So don't let weariness trick you into believing you're weak. You're not weak, you're discerning. You just need clarity from the one who sees the full picture. There is a reason the door hasn't fully closed in your heart. There is a reason the bond hasn't broken, even after everything that happened. When God ties a purpose to a person, even conflict can't uproot it. Distance can't dissolve it. Time can't erase it, because God works in connections that challenge you, stretch you, and ultimately elevate you. And sometimes the person you're ready to walk away from is connected to a destiny you haven't stepped into yet. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect or ignore your boundaries. It means you don't run from a situation God is still working in. There is a difference between staying out of fear and staying out of obedience. There is a difference between clinging to toxicity and clinging to purpose. And deep down, you know the difference. Deep down, you sense this person isn't finished growing, and God hasn't given you the release because their growth is tied to your patience, and your elevation is tied to how you handle this moment. You've been praying for direction, and sometimes God's direction is not a road sign. It's a restraint. It's the gentle hand that says, don't leave yet. There's more to learn. There's more to heal. There's more to restore. Written. Right now, heaven is whispering to your heart, don't walk away yet. There is a moment in every believer's journey when God places his hand gently but firmly on your spirit and says, wait. Not because you're confused, not because you're weak, and not because you lack the courage to move on, but because there is something he is shaping within the situation that you cannot yet see. When God instructs you not to walk away from a person just yet, it's rarely about the other person alone. It's about what he is forming in you, through you, and sometimes even in spite of you. That divine pause is a spiritual signal that the relationship still carries purpose, healing, and unfinished growth that heaven has not yet released. You can feel this pause in the tension between your mind and your spirit. Your mind is tired. Your emotions are worn down. You've rehearsed every reason why walking away would protect your peace, your sanity, and your heart. Yet there is still that unexplainable tug that holds you back from closing the door completely. It's not nostalgia. It's not attachment. It's not fear. It's a divine restraint that says the situation has not yet fulfilled what God intended it to accomplish. When God places purpose in a connection, He doesn't always reveal it immediately. Sometimes He lets the bond unfold slowly, allowing the pressure and imperfections to push both people toward transformation. You may think you're ready to walk away because you are tired of going in circles, but God sees progress you cannot see. He sees the root issues beneath the surface, the unspoken wounds, the unhealed memories, the hidden insecurities that are being addressed through this very connection. He knows that leaving prematurely could lead you right back into the same cycles you are trying to break. So instead of letting you run, He applies the pause, not as punishment, be you, as protection. The divine pause is also God's way of revealing the difference between emotions and discernment. Emotions can be loud, impulsive, and reactive. They can convince you that discomfort means danger and conflict means closure, but discernment speaks from a deeper place. Discernment whispers that something is happening beneath the tension. Something is shifting, maturing, realigning. God sometimes keeps you connected to a person not because the journey has been easy, but because the relationship is refining both of you in ways that comfort never could. You may be learning patience, humility, or emotional honesty. You may be learning how to communicate without shutting down, how to love without losing yourself, or how to set boundaries without building walls. And the other person may be learning too, how to be accountable, how to appreciate what they once took for granted, how to grow into the version of themselves that God intended. If you walk away now, both of you could miss the transformation that is just beginning to take shape. There are relationships that God assigns because they carry seeds of destiny within them. The connection may feel ordinary on the surface, even frustrating at times, but heaven sees what is being built. Heaven sees how this relationship will strengthen your future, deepen your faith, and stretch your capacity to love. Heaven sees the blessing hidden inside the challenge. And sometimes the reason you're not released yet is because you're standing on the border of breakthrough, even if the situation still feels messy. God's pause is rarely comfortable. It often challenges your pride because staying requires vulnerability. It challenges your fear because staying means risking disappointment again. It challenges your independence because staying demands collaboration instead of isolation. But everything God develops in you during this pause is preparing you for something greater. He is shaping your character, sharpening your discernment, and strengthening your ability to love with wisdom, not naivety. The pause also protects you from making a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion. God knows when your heart is exhausted. He knows when your judgment is clouded by hurt or impatience. And because He knows what is ahead, He sometimes delays your departure until you are thinking from your spirit, not your scars. The divine pause is His way of saying, you're too close to purpose to quit now. This is not about tolerating toxicity or abandoning your worth. God never calls you to remain in harm. But He does sometimes call you to remain in a connection that still has purpose, even if the purpose hasn't revealed itself yet. He may be aligning the timing, working on the other person's heart, or healing an internal wound in you that only this situation can expose. And once that work is complete, clarity will come, peace will come. And when God finally releases you, whether to stay or to go, you'll know it without question. For now, the pause is your confirmation that the story isn't finished. Purpose is still unfolding. God is still speaking, and the relationship still has something sacred to deliver before the season shifts. The divine pause is not a delay. It is a divine instruction wrapped in love. There comes a point in every meaningful connection where the pressure becomes almost unbearable, where the misunderstandings build and where the emotional weight feels heavier than anything you signed up for. It's easy to assume that tension is a sign to walk away, but what if the tension is actually the doorway to transformation? What if the struggle is not an ending, but an invitation? So often, what feels like relational chaos is actually the very environment God uses to stretch you, refine you. Need day become the foundation of a stronger bond, a deeper understanding, and a more mature connection than you've ever had. God is using this relationship to teach you how to communicate with clarity instead of reactivity, how to apologize without defensiveness, how to express needs without fear, and how to be patient without feeling powerless. He's teaching you emotional discipline, relational wisdom, and spiritual discernment. He's teaching you how to love without losing yourself and how to stay present without running away from discomfort. And in the same way, he's teaching the other person how to grow into the version of themselves that can honor you, respect you, and walk with you in maturity. You are both in process, and process is messy. Process is exhausting. Process is uncomfortable, but process is necessary. The tension you feel is not the end. It's the transformation. And each moment of struggle, each difficult conversation, and each emotional stretch is shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more spiritually aligned. The relationship may not look perfect right now, but perfection was never the goal. Growth is the goal. Healing is the goal. Purpose is the goal. And nothing that carries purpose comes without moments of challenge. This is why God hasn't released you yet, because the work isn't finished. The story isn't complete. And the tension you feel is simply the evidence that something sacred is being built. There is a moment in every heart-heavy season when you realize that your emotions are speaking louder than your clarity. You feel the pull to leave, the temptation to distance yourself, the desire to protect your peace by walking away before things get more complicated. But what you want in the moment and what God is guiding you toward are not always the same. That's why clarity matters. That's why waiting matters. That's why patience becomes more than a virtue. It becomes a spiritual strategy. When God is still working in a situation, he will not give you peace to walk away from it. And when he has not released you, it's because something sacred is still unfolding beneath the surface, even if your emotions are too loud for you to recognize it. Waiting for God's clarity is hard because it requires surrender. It requires pausing when everything in you wants to act. It requires trusting that God sees the full picture while you only see the fragmented pieces. It requires acknowledging that your feelings, although valid, are not always accurate indicators of divine timing. Feelings fluctuate. Hurt speaks loudly. Fear echoes. Frustration blinds. But God's clarity cuts through all of that with a stillness that quiets your spirit and lets you know the difference between emotional exhaustion and divine release. There are times when you want to make a quick decision just to escape the pressure. You want to close the door before it closes on you. You want to choose distance because connection feels like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like risk. But walking away without God's peace leads to regret, confusion, and unfinished healing. God is not a God of confusion. He is a God of order. If he is asking you to stay for a moment longer, it is not because he wants you to suffer. It is because he wants you to see something you would miss if you rush the process. Sometimes that clarity comes slowly. It comes through a shift in your spirit that you can't quite explain. It comes through moments where God reveals pieces of the other person's heart, their potential, or their struggle. It comes through sudden understanding of their wounds, their triggers, their fears. It comes through glimpses of your own growth, the realization that you don't react the way you used to, that you communicate with more grace, that you becoming stronger and softer at the same time. Clarity is not always a dramatic revelation. Sometimes it is a gentle unfolding of truth that only patience can uncover. Waiting for God's clarity also protects you from decisions rooted in pain rather than purpose. Pain can convince you that leaving is the safest option, but safety doesn't build destiny. Pain wants to protect you, but God wants to promote you. Pain wants to avoid discomfort, but God uses discomfort to develop spiritual strength. When you move prematurely, you end up repeating the same patterns with new people. But when you wait for God's confirmation, you break cycles instead of recreating them. You will know when God is giving you peace to move forward, and you will know when He is withholding that peace to keep you still. Peace is unmistakable. It doesn't mean everything feels easy or perfect. It means your spirit feels settled, even if your circumstances are unsettled. Without that peace, walking away becomes a spiritual misalignment. With that peace, walking away becomes an act of obedience. But until that peace comes, God is asking you to trust His timing more than your emotions. The waiting period is not wasted time. It is preparation time. It is God softening hearts, healing wounds, strengthening character, and aligning both of you with the wisdom needed for the next step, whatever that step looks like. God may be preparing the other person to show up differently, to understand their own flaws, or to finally address the issues they've avoided for years. He may be preparing you to communicate clearly, to forgive fully, or to see past your fears. He may be preparing both of you for a breakthrough that your impatience would have destroyed. In the waiting, God teaches you discernment. He teaches you how to recognize His voice separate from your emotions. He teaches you the difference between staying out of obedience and staying out of desperation. He teaches you how to hold on to faith when your feelings want to flee. He teaches you how to see purpose in places that feel uncertain. And He teaches you that decisions made from spiritual alignment produce peace, while decisions made from emotional impulse produce turmoil. You may not understand why God is asking you to wait right now, but one day you will. You will see why He didn't let you leave when you wanted to. You will see why He kept the connection alive even when it felt fragile. You will see why He allowed the tension, the questions, the stretching. You will see how the waiting shaped you, strengthened you, and softened you. And you will see how His timing protected you from choices that would have taken you off course. For now, the only thing you need to hold on to is this: clarity comes from God, not from chaos. Peace is your confirmation, not pressure. And until God releases you, there is still something meaningful being built in the unseen. In the end, everything you've walked through, every moment of tension, every unanswered question, every internal battle has been shaping you for a deeper understanding of God's timing and purpose. This journey hasn't been about choosing comfort or escape. It's been about choosing growth, truth, and discernment. You've learned what it means to pause when your emotions want to rush, to stay when fear wants to flee, and to trust when clarity requires patience. You've discovered that God doesn't hold you in a situation to harm you, but to prepare you. And the strength you've built, the wisdom you've gained, and the healing you have stepped into are evidence that nothing you're experiencing is wasted. When God is guiding your steps, even the hardest moments become stepping stones toward becoming who you were meant to be. So stand firm, stay open, and keep your spirit aligned with His voice. Because when the time is right, God will either strengthen the connection or gracefully release you from it. And whichever way He leads, it will be wrapped in peace, purpose, and undeniable clarity. And when that moment comes, you'll look back and realize that every pause, every prayer, and every piece of the process was worth it.